Our keynote presenters, Richard and Nora Dauenhauer, as you all know, are pillars of our community. They brought out, I think, literature and respect for literature, and acknowledgement of literature in our culture. Robert Bringhurst once told me, you can not like literature, you can hate literature, but it's like hating air or food. If you don't do it, you're going to get sick. And when we listen to people like Dick and Nora, we feel the health coming in. We feel our soul being fed and nourished. So, Gunashish, let's give a round of applause for Dick and Nora.
I'm going to talk about a minute and give you kind of an overview of what we're going to do, and then you're going to have hers and his keynote, so you get two for the price of one here tonight. We were so very, very happy and honored to be invited to do the keynote, and Steve kept bugging me about a title for this thing, and I don't know what we're going to talk about. Something will inspire us. So finally we came up with a title, Revival and Survival, 2 Lifetimes in Tlingit. And I figured that would give us plenty of chance to talk about everything we wanted to talk about. So basically, we're going to look at this 2 ways. One is the 2 lifetimes are Nora and me and how we came to this and what we've been doing. And the other 2 lifetimes that we want to talk about are the past and the future of the situation. So we'll talk a little bit about our work over the last 35 years together. And then I want to talk about this second lifetime. Where are we going for the next 35 years? And that's something that I think we want to think a little bit. Okay, the other thing we need to do here, if we're doing keynote-y things, is try to tie it somehow to the conference theme. So that's always good. So sharing our knowledge is the official theme, so we thought we would also try to talk a little bit about sharing. So I think what's going to happen in what you'll hear from us is when we're talking about the past, there's 2 kinds of sharing going on that Nora and I have worked on. Some things that each of us knew that the other didn't, that we've shared with each other, and some things we discovered together in the process of doing the work, things that weren't there before. And I think, too, in the future that we can talk about what each one of us here has that can be shared with somebody else, and also just the marvelous mystery and excitement of what can be discovered when we start working together that we had no idea is going to happen. So that's sort of our overview. So theoretically, it's all going to be very well organized and totally coherent. And I'm going to turn it over to Nora, who's going to say everything that she's been wanting to say. And you're on.
I want to say hooray for Tlingit literature. I am so happy tonight to see all of you who appreciate Tlingit Shkatnigi, which is Tlingit literature. Aktuwisigu, I am very happy about this. What I need to tell is that before I discovered Tlingit, I went to the bars with my spare money, and I gave my money to people who didn't even like me. For those of you who go to the bars, remember that. It's true, they didn't like me. Anyway, which is what I abandoned after discovering Tlingit. I was hired to teach Tlingit in Juneau Douglas High School in 1969. I was a sixth grade dropout from school. And in teaching high school students, I discovered I needed education. So I went to the only thing I knew that was accessible to me, GED. It took me 7 months to complete it. But I had a real good teacher. She was a wonderful woman. And I had very good students who were my classmates, and we helped each other trying to figure out what we were supposed to do with our lessons. So after half a year in Juneau Douglas High School, I got this letter of discharge, which really was painful. But I pulled through it, went up to Anchorage for the National Congress of Native Americans, and where I met Dick. And I entered the college, Alaska Methodist University, and started my higher education there. It was really hard, really hard after dropping out of school and going through GED. But I finally made it. After 5 years of college, I graduated. And by that time, Dick and I were working on the project I started, the Tlingit oratory, which was done at my father's potlatch. I was working on that, and I showed it to Dick, and lo and behold, he thought it was wonderful. But he's really a student of literature, and I wasn't. I didn't know what it was. So anyway, I showed it to him, and I kept working on the Tlingit oratory. Jesse Dalton, that was the oratory I started to work on. And it was difficult, very emotional for me, because I discovered this is something, I didn't discover it right away. It just made me sad because of the way the words were put together. And after a while, I started to learn this is something we're going to lose. So I kept on working on it. And then I started to work on other speeches that were with Jesse Dalton. And then sometime along the way, Carlton Smith called us and asked if we could write some oratory or attend the Sitka, I think it was Native Education program. Ethel, help me. Yeah. I can't remember what year it was. 1980. 82. And the students of SNP were videotaping the conference where the teenagers came out to dance. And the attending elders, George Davis, and a whole bunch of other ones. And Ethel's father was the speaker, the host for the elders. And this was what Carlton wanted us to work on. Oh boy, we were really beginners. We had IBM, Dick had an IBM. We didn't have computers. And by the time we finished our manuscript, it looked like a mummy because it had correct tape all over it. And it was thick. But we got it in print anyway. And we brought it down for the See Alaska meeting. And they hired 2 lawyers to check out the copyright. And they were afraid to pass them out. They gave me one, and they gave Dick a copy. I'm not sure if they gave you one. Anyway, I finally gave Charlie my copy because he didn't get one. It was the oratory from all the elders that were there at the meeting. I am so happy that this happened. We were able to help the elders and let them see what could be done with their words. But unfortunately, See Alaska packed it up and sent the boxes back to Juneau. I don't know why. I couldn't tell you why. It was never done before. Maybe that was the reason. We have never, ever written anything Tlingit in Tlingit. So this was a streak of luck for us because Carlton Smith was convinced that we could do anything. At one time, he found us in Finland, or was it Austria? Austria. We took a trip to Austria, and we were hiding over there, and lo and behold, here's Carlton Smith. We want you to do this and this and this and that. So anyway, when we came back, we came to him and asked him. There was another project. Well, in that way, we kept on going. And it was very wonderful and sad for me. Really great. I discovered the Tlingit Tundatani, the thoughts of Tlingit, and how they can present it to people. Beautiful stuff. And I was a goner. I had to keep going. So that was the short of it that I could tell you. I'm not sure if I could think of more to say now, except that we need more storytellers. And I want to give you a little bit of instructions. When you write, find the best writer you know, to make sure your writing is in good spelling order. I know there's a lot of you writing. I could see it. I look at them. Some of us who are writing today got training from linguists. I think Sitka Native Education got Jeff Lear. Yeah, Jeff Lear is a linguist for Tlingit. And he's my son. he adopted me as his mother. I don't know if I'm a good mother. For those of you who don't know how to speak Tlingit, try to learn it so you could understand what we're talking about up here. George Ramus said yesterday, we have to remember our ownership to our lands. It is true. You can remember your ownership to your land in Tlingit better than you can in English. And this is why we should learn Tlingit and learn about our land. And Ray Wilson said yesterday, the white man recognizes us by our votes. If we come together, we have more strength. I agree with him. We have more strength in numbers. Our books written in Tlingit. We worked at Alaska Heritage Foundation for years. We came down in 1983, and David Katzik hired us to do materials. And instead of doing kitty lit, we started to do the things we know that need to be saved. And one of them was Hashuka, Hatuanago Yis, to heal our spirits, and Hakosti, our culture. And we left these books at Alaska when we left there, because they belong to the Tlingit people. They belong to all of us, which is why we left them there. And Alaska Heritage Foundation is getting the royalties and has the copyright. So Dick and I don't have that. When we left there, we left all the books, and those that will be reprinted are theirs. We need more writers to write these books. We now have in Tlingit Ruth Demert and Bert Kadashan in English, Bert Adams, that is, Ernestine Hayes in English, Andy Hope in English, Ishmael Hope in English, Hans Chester in Tlingit. Yay! Harold Jacobs, he's a writer too. Gunachish to all of you. And we need composers of songs. We now have Harold Jacobs, who's a composer, Hans Chester, who's a composer also. This is all wonderful. Maybe it'll catch on to our younger generation. Maybe teenagers will want to compose. And that is what I think we need to do in short order.
Chuck, yes, Chuck Miller.
Chuck Miller, yay! Ka'adusa, that it? Adusa.
Lyle James.
Oh, Lyle. Oh, he is a wonderful guy. He's going up to University of Alaska, Anchorage, to compete in the oratory competition because he walked away with all titles. Storyteller, oratory, Tlingit language. There's another one I can't remember.
Oh, Robert, yes. Robert Davis poetry.
Robert Davis poetry. He's another writer. Anybody
Vivian
else? Vivian Mork.
Senior and junior.
Yeah, senior and junior. Okay, Vida Davis of children's songs. Yeah, go ahead. And that's... Oh, Lance Twitchell, my nephew, my grandson, my own grandson. So many of them to remember, and they're all doing good. They're all wonderful people, and they'll be real good elders. Gunatish, thank you all for listening.
Well, that's going to be hard to follow, but I'll do my best. I'll give you his side of the story. We have the she said, you get the he said, this, especially how we met. Basically, it's illegal. I put the hustle on my freshman student, but what could I say? But now that I have time for confession tonight here, and as Nora said, there's a lot of work in this. I can't tell you how many times proofreading has brought us to the brink of divorce, but we've managed to tough it out for 33, going on 34 years, and still counting. So. Yeah, we appreciated all of Harold's jokes last night about old people. So that's as we grow old. Well, I'd like to tell a little bit now about how I came to this, because my half of the working together is totally different. I grew up in upstate New York, and my ancestry is Irish and German. So I guess I'm Irish and I'm German yadi. But I was interested in languages ever since I was a kid, and studied German and Russian. Had a chance to be an exchange student in high school, which shaped my life a lot. The appreciation of doing things in more language than one, and living with a German family, and was interested in writing ever since high school. So in college, I studied a lot of languages. My major was Russian, and my minor was German, and I studied other things like Greek, and all the way through, involved with classical Greek, and then one thing led to another, and I fell in love with translation. So I do a lot of translating to this day of poetry. So basically, in graduate school, I ran out of money, and there was a job opening up in Anchorage at Alaska Methodist University, and to make a long story short, I applied and got it, and off I went. And then basically met Nora, and that's the short version. But my big desire coming to the university was to apply Euro-American status to Alaska Native languages and literature. And that's what Ish mentioned a little bit before, is the professional treatment of Alaska Native oral literature with dignity and with respect. And this is often a hard sell. Even Albert Lord, who worked on oral literature at Harvard, had trouble convincing his colleagues that there was anything to it, or convincing his colleagues that Beowulf was probably oral, that the Homeric epics were originally oral. And the processes by which people like Homer and the composer of Beowulf composed these was the same processes that we see in the Tlingit community today. So it aggravated me very much, and still does, to see native language trivialized, to say, well, it's children's literature, or schools say, oh, well, we tried that in the 4th grade and it didn't work. And I said, well, yeah, is that where you teach Julius Caesar also in the 4th grade? No, I mean, there's obviously children's literature, there's children's stories, but to take adult literature from another culture and treat it as if it's children's literature is basically racism, and we used to see a lot of this. And I think that's what bothered me very much, is that we don't want this marginalized. We want oral literature taken seriously, and I'll talk a little bit more about style, because as my students know, I really get excited about this, and I think sometimes see them falling asleep, but no, to me it's very exciting is why people repeat things and how they handle languages, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. The other thing that bothered me very much was the whole socio-political dimension, and we're still fighting that battle, the right to bilingual education, and that children can learn in their own language first. And this always amazed me, as I had Japanese students who'd learned everything in Japanese, learned English as a second language, were performing much better in college than UPIC students who had everything taught to them in English. So I mean, well, what would be if these kids had the opportunity of learning the concepts in their own language and then learning English as a second language? Because if I could do it in German, they can do it in English. And that was, of course, when I was in a German school, I did very well in German because I like languages. I did very poor in math. My German math was a disaster. Anyhow, so the very first thing I was asked to do in Anchorage was the speech therapist came to me and said, we can't tell the difference between a Yupik accent and the speech impediment. And I said, wow, at least these people are asking the right question, because a lot of people weren't. As all the people with brown faces are ending up in speech therapy. They don't put Bill Clinton in speech therapy. They don't put Henry Kissinger. Parrish thought that Zsa Zsa Gabor should ever be put in a special lab. But these were things that there are legitimate ranges for speech therapy, and there are other things that are simply regional accents. And a lot of the schools had trouble sorting that out, and it was very easy to stick all the natives in where the money was. So these are some of the issues that we began fighting, and we're still in the trenches. So as I mentioned before, I got a little ahead of my story. I met Nora. And the rest is history on that. So then we started working together, and this was something that shaped our work of the last 35 or more years. And the rules that we came up with, and it helped me a lot, of course, to have Nora hammering away at some of these. And the first thing was, this is the Tlingit point of view, that we are having the elders are speaking for themselves. We're not putting words in their mouth. These are the words of the elders. All we're the transcribers. We're like the microphone. We're sending it out. So that for the first time in a lot of the Tlingit point of view could be presented in the words of the elders, because it had never been done before. It had always been paraphrased or translated. So we came up with 3 standards. When Nora mentioned we were working with David Katzik at the Heritage Foundation, and the 3 main criteria that we wanted for all of our work is, number 1, that it's acceptable to community standards. So you don't come in from the outside and do a number on people. That you work with the people that want to be worked with, and that what you do is open and above board, and it meets the standards of the community. But also that it meets academic standards, because it works both ways. You can have stuff that the university thinks is great that bombs in the community. You can have stuff that people in the community think is great, but nobody else knows what you're talking about. So it should, at the same time as it's acceptable to the community, it should also be acceptable to serious scholars. And finally, that it's accessible to the average interested, intelligent reader. Because sometimes you can get stuff that's totally jargonese and As somebody said about one of our friends' theses, it's brilliant but impenetrable. So we don't want to have brilliant but impenetrable books. And another thing that we're doing, some of you are visitors from Sitka to Roby's, to the class that Roby's in. We're teaching things by distance delivery, and so Roby and her daughter and some of the others are Vivian, both Vivians are in that class, and so they have these wonderful parties in which everybody sits around chomping on their dry fish, and they put it on mute so we won't hear them, chomping too much. But anyhow, we're working together on establishing text. So that's the first thing. When you study English literature and you read the English Macbeth, that's been around for 400 years. It's there. What we're doing with the Tlingit literature is the process that Nora talked about, is that we're taking that from oral literature, writing it down for the first time, and we want to be sure we hear what they're saying on the tape, we're spelling it right, and so on. And then translating it. So then opens up another whole can of worms, is how do you translate this so that it makes sense? And we argue with that back and forth, makes sense. No, it doesn't. Yes, it does. No, it doesn't. I don't understand it. Well, that's your problem, So anyhow, we work these things out. And I will talk a little bit about style now. Style and personality are two of my favorite things, because typically in oral tradition from Native people, you'd have people say, well, here's an old Tlingit story. And, well, who was it told by? Oh, we don't know, the folk. Well, yeah, it's baloney. There are individual storytellers and individual people, and we have their words, and their styles are radically different. So you'll see this when you look at our book. You have, Robert Zuboff and E.P. Johnson, absolutely totally different styles. And we're discovering now, we're working with a text from Angoon from 1963 from Jimmy Johnson, and I'm pointing out, look at, this guy loves dependent clauses, look! And everybody's saying, oh, give me a break, what's a dependent clause? But looky here, there's a sequential, we don't have that in Zuboff. This guy's got 7 of them, look at this, And Katherine Mills, a wonderful Raven story, within 14 lines, she has, I don't know how many versions of the verb to hop. Raven's hopping up and down in place, then he's hopping out, then he's hopping back, then he's flying along hopping. And so this is great. Hopefully some of my students get as excited as I do about these things. And also personality, that these are the, Robert Zuboff's the great story about the mosquito, and he ends and he said, well, it's very important that God didn't create evil in the world. It was humans that messed up, because, this is okay. So here's his theology. And if we wouldn't have had mosquitoes if it weren't for human greed. And so, life's going bad. Don't blame it on God. It's your fault. But you see the personality coming through. And for example, you look at the 2 versions of the Glacier Bay story, one by Amy Marvin and one by Susie James of Sitka, and they're really different. Susie James is very mythic, and it just cuts to the chase on the eternal return and fertility of the land and the people. And Amy Marvin's is much more socially oriented. It's just incredible. And the book we're working with now, the Battles of Sitka, we have the 2 versions, one from Sally Hopkins, who was Kiksadi, and the other by Alex Andrews, who was Kagwantan Kiksadi Yadi. And as we mentioned in our session this afternoon, the Alex Andrews is like Homer. It's just blow by blow by blow description of the battles and stuff. If you blink, you miss the battle in Sally Hopkins. You say, well, wait a minute, where was the Battle of 1804? Where's Katherine? On the other hand, she's got 75 or 80 personal names in the story, all the genealogies. What was the social impact of the events on the people, on the civilians, so the non-combatants, and of course the other stuff is in there too. So anyhow, that's what to me is so exciting, and that we wanted to do with the oral literature, is to say this is the glory of the people in the oral tradition. A few other things. We also involved with instructional materials. I won't mention too much about that, but they're beginning Tlingit grammar, and we're still working on this now. We're trying to get intermediate done and spelling books and so on. Another very, very, very important part of our work is trying to empower Native people to do this also. And this has been our political agenda. I'm very proud of our kids that we're doing this the other day, is we want to try and get people through college with credentials so that they can get involved with the system and they could, be doing that kind of stuff. So that's part of my current job. Very happy to be a President's Professor at Alaska South UAS in Juneau. And it's a 3-year appointment, but it's a 3-year window to try and develop the courses. Last fall, I'm very proud to say that for the first time in history, we offered Tlingit, Haida, Tsimshian. All three languages were offered, and we hope to continue this more and work with distance delivery. We do have a minor in Tlingit now. You can take the minor, and that was. And our next effort is a certificate modeled on the ones that they have in Fairbanks for other languages, and some of what, for example, is at University of Northern British Columbia. So this is part of our political agenda on doing that. Okay, the future. I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about, that's where we've been the last 35 years. Where are we going? And the big question, where is the next generation of speakers, scholars, learners, teachers, leaders, where are they coming from? So that's the overwhelming picture. And 35 years, if I'm, God willing, alive, I'll be 90, okay? I don't know how many of us, the rest of us, I don't know if I'll be around. How many of us will be around in 35 years? Where will we be? Where will the second generation be? Where will the people behind be? So there's a very frightening, rapidly closing window of opportunity, and we figure it's about 10 years for the learners to work with the birth speakers of the language. And this is people who grew up speaking the language. Now, there are going to be people later on hopefully people who've understood it all their lives that maybe will begin to become more active speakers. But this is going to be the last opportunity to work with people who were born and raised with that as their first language. And a lot of times when there's loss, it's gone forever. And we've talked a lot about that. So. I did a paper years ago, and it was just published recently, called 700 million to 1. And in this, I compared the impact that any one of us could have on Mandarin Chinese, which has 700 million speakers, or a language like Eyak, which has 1. And we would include in there Tsimshian, Haida, Tlingit, any of the Alaska Native languages. What you do will have an impact on those languages. I mean, if I were to do a German grammar, it would not make any impact whatsoever on the German language. The survival of the German language is doing quite well. Likewise, Chinese. And in a way, it's kind of a comforting thing. It was one of my friends who studies Chinese says he can screw up, he can mess it up. It's not going to mess up the Chinese language. They're doing quite well without him. But we want to be very careful with what we do. I mean, if we end up teaching poorly, it's going to take a generation to fix it. And so we hope we're not doing too many disastrous things. So let me get a little bit preachy here. I think the first message would be to use the tools, and that's education, it's literacy, computers, the technology. Sometimes people get, in anguish about, oh my God, should we use English and stuff? Simon Ortiz had a great comment. He said, it's a weapon, use it. And of course, the founders of the A and B knew this too. I mean, if you want to get in there and compete, you've got to get the education, you've got to know these things. Literacy is a tool. It wasn't traditional. Nobody came out of the wombs writing any language, whether it was English or Russian or anything. But there is a long tradition of literacy in English. There isn't in Tlingit. It's something new, but it's a tool. And likewise, all the electronic stuff we saw yesterday and today, PowerPoints, I mean, it's great. I would also say get the skills to learn and to maintain and to teach. And this can be in the family, it can be in the community, it can be in the schools, it can be all kinds of venues. It doesn't have to be for university credit. We're basically in the credit and certification business, so I'm kind of hung up on that. But the language is not going to survive through a certificate, it's going to survive through community effort. So, whatever you do, speak it, talk it. And that's, of course, where we get to the theme of the conference here, sharing knowledge, working together. And it can be formal, like in our classes. We've benefited so much by having the distance delivery, and Roby brings in the elders. Ethel and Irene have been with us, and several other elders. And I certainly could not do any of that alone. I mean, we just need the wisdom of the elders. So these I have a bunch of a list here of kind of working together. So elders and youngers, speakers and learners, the community and the university. Family history and archival history. That I'd like to really repeat because these complement each other. We've found in several cases where family history will have one set of information and the archives will have the other, and if you put them together you get the whole picture. For example, the birth certificates, all of these, the genealogical things may be in the archives, but the family history makes it come alive. And so it's like putting a puzzle together, and each of the people has a different piece of it. So for example, those of you who were this afternoon in our session on Russian America, and Judy and Elaine went through some of the Yakutat oral history, and I can give them the names from the Russian documents of who the Russians were. The Russians, of course, don't have who the Tlingits were. You put those together and we get the names of the people on both sides of the battle. Likewise, oral literature and written literature. Different rules for that. I mean, what makes good oral style is not necessarily what makes good written style. So that's, again, one of my big hang-ups. And as we talked a little bit about this morning, world literature and local literature. I mean, where does Tlingit fit as an example of world literature? So anyhow, those are just some of the things. I would give you one example of probably the most important thing that we discovered doing our book, personal names. Get the names, record them from as many elders as you can, because a lot of the names that are in the text that we've got are no longer in circulation, and we can't go anymore. The last of the people that knew those names from birth, they're gone. As I mentioned this afternoon, we finally are in a position to ask the questions, but the people who had the answers are no longer alive. So that's what's going to be important, is to get the accurate pronunciation on CD or something. Try to get an accurate spelling, because if you're using your own private system, it may be good for you, but nobody else is going to be able to know what it is. And then information about these people, because that's precious, and it's something that only people can do in the family. Likewise, old tape recordings. We're just working with one, as I mentioned, from 1963, another from 1958, and these are incredible. But again, it's a window in time. You're going back, and I was thinking about this. If you have a person who was 70 years old and you recorded the story 50 years ago, then you're going back 120 years of the language. Because somebody like Charlie Joseph was figured by the time he's 5, he's fluent. And you record him when he's 70, that's going back. And also something that we can't do outside the community. Let's say you have a tape recording of a party from Angoon in 1960. Who are those voices? And if you're from the community, you'd know, oh, that's Uncle Harry talking, and that's Aunt so-and-so. So Nora was able to do this. She mentioned these speeches from Huna, and she'd play it, and I said, what's that? All I hear is dishes rattling and stuff like that. What's so-and-so making a speech? Say, huh? Oh yeah, because you're hearing some squeaky voice in the background, and but to know that, to know the people, to know those voices, you can give that life where the best linguist in the world can't do that. And we could like transcribe it, but we have no idea who the speaker is. But somebody locally can do that. So local knowledge is critical, and we've benefited so much by having the Sitka people helping us. I'd like to just say a couple of words about some of the barriers. What are the barriers to doing this? And I can't go into detail on this, but a lot of it is maybe fear, insecurity, guilt sometimes, and hopefully this is on the wane. But it's something we have to come to grips with. It's not everybody's cup of tea. I don't expect that everybody will want to learn the ancestral language, and I would be hypocritical if I insisted on that. I don't have enough lifetimes to learn Irish. I drink my beer on St. Patrick's Day, and I learned that the Catholics drink Jamesons and the Protestants drink Bushmills, and I drink both of them. I like to, I'm eclectic, ecumenical. But I did, on the German side, I'm fluent in German, and I did research on that, but I haven't done the other side. So not everybody's going to do that, but somehow coming to grips with that, I think, will be important. I would say right now what we're experiencing, one of our biggest barriers, be perfectly honest about this, institutional politics, and we've got to somehow cut through that crap. I mean, we can't have there's limited number of time, limited number of energy, limited money. We can't be fighting over it. Likewise, personal rivalry, jealousy, sabotage, protecting turf, all these turf wars. We don't have time enough for that. It's not a luxury we can afford. So finally, but I'd rather end on an optimistic note, that Nora and I have been just so impressed with the high energy level at this conference, and the talent of the younger people, the wisdom of the elders, just the tremendous outpouring of goodwill. And we're just so amazed at this. One of our friends once compared this to be like an acre of fruitcake. There's just too much going on, and we're getting a little bit of indigestion from all of the activity and the energy. But it's wonderful, and again, my hat is off to the organizers. I know Sergey and Andy and Steve were kind of wondering, what if, back about a year and a half, 2 years ago. But all the effort that went into hustling the money to do this and organizing it, and people like me trying to lay low because I had a full plate already. But I think you've done a wonderful job, and are just so proud to be here. We're proud of you, and I guess that's end of my. Do you want to say anything?
I just want to say I just want to say a few words on what Dick said about politics. We're going to have to put all that aside. We've been shot down many times, but we keep on going anyway, and hope that it will stop. I think Tlingit literature and our identity that comes from the literature is too precious to play around with it. So this is all I want to say. Thank you.